Hello and welcome, I am Scrapperlock, and this is Souling the Stalker. We have about 200,000 XP to go for Dark Phantom to hit level 41. Might happen in this episode. I have skipped a little bit of content. I made a video doing a sort of a tabletop RPG rant, and I like the stuff I said in it, but it was a completely disorganized mess, and I suspect that nobody would be able to follow what I was saying, or at least it would be aggravating, because it kept getting distracted and changing what I was talking about, and it was a disaster. So this is take two, and I'm going to see if I can maybe be a little bit more organized. I haven't written anything down, probably should have, but I'm going to see if I can be maybe a little bit more organized as I talk about this. What I'm going to try to do is describe the original situation. I'm writing it down actually as I say this. I'm going to give Professor DM's take. Then I'm going to give my take, and my take is going to cover the game, the setting, and then playing D&D. So this comes from Dungeons and Dragons. Professor Dungeon Master apparently doesn't do much with Reddit, but a friend of his told him he should read some Reddit, and so he went onto it. And the first thing he found was a story post by a Dungeon Master who wanted to know if he had done the right thing. And in this story, and so the Professor DM's post about this one up on, I believe, January 26th. So if you go and look in Professor Dungeon Master's feed, it's Dungeon Craft. You can see in that channel, you'll be able to see where this video is, and go over the whole thing. I'm not going to quote the entire Reddit post. I'm going to summarize it, hopefully as fairly and objectively as I can. So one thing we don't know in this story, because it wasn't included in the post, is the relationship amongst the players and between the players and the DM. Who's shooting me? Oh, this guy. So we don't know. Are all the players friends with each other? Are they all friends with the DM? It doesn't seem to be a paid DM because he didn't mention anything about that. We don't know. Is the player, say, friends with one of the players but not the DM, or friends with the DM and not the other players? Are they all friends with each other? How old are they? It's unclear. They seem to be adults based on some things internal to the commentary, such as the person saying he's quote-unquote always wanted to try D&D. But that could go just as far back as last year, depending on how young he is and what he means by always. So I really don't know the answers to any of those things. So I'm going to have to make a few assumptions. So I'm going to assume that by always wanted to play D&D, we're talking about going back a number of years, somebody who's been hearing about it for many years, not somebody who just heard about it last week or even last year. That it's been a while, right? And I'm going to assume that these players all are friends from the story. This appears to be the case based on how it all shook out, but there's really no way to know. So according to the story that Professor Dungeon Master posted and read aloud, and according to what the Reddit post said, we have a situation where you have a Dungeon Master and several players. The number of players is unknown, but at least two other players besides the one we're talking about. We don't know the genders of anybody, so I'm just going to say he to make it easier. I'm not going to go he, she all the time. So this player that the DM is talking about went to the Dungeon Master and said, I don't know if they had just been invited to play. It sounds like the play has not gone on for long. And this, or maybe the player hasn't actually joined the group, right? It might be an existing group or a recently formed group. Again, this is unclear. The player went to the DM. Let's assume that this is before this player has played, but maybe the group has been around for a while. Maybe these guys are friends and they've been trying to get this person to play with them, and he's kept saying no, no thank you. So why is that? Well, what he said to the DM was he's always wanted to play D&D, but he's been afraid to do so because he doesn't want his character to die. He gets very attached to his characters, and he would be very upset if his character died, and he doesn't think he would like that. So he really, really, really wants to try D&D, but he doesn't want to try it if it's possible for his character to die. Okay? So what he wants from the DM, I guess, is an assurance that death is not on the table, at least for his character. There's nothing in the text of this that argues that he doesn't want any characters to die. It's really all about how attached he gets to his own character, right? So he gets attached to his own character and doesn't want it to die. He wouldn't like that. So the GM decided to try and work with this person, and his solution was to say to him, well, I'll tell you what, I won't kill your character, but there will still, you need to understand that there will still be consequences to losing in combat. And Professor Dungeon Master then said, what would the consequences look like if you can't die? Like, what consequence other than death are we talking about? He doesn't say, so we don't know. He said, the GM said, I promise not to go for your character's throat. Does that mean I won't attack your character at all? Does that mean I'll attack your character last? If the villains have a choice of two characters, instead of the way I do it, if there's a choice and there's no objectively good reason to attack number one or number two, I'll roll the die and say, here, I'll say to the players now, each of you roll a die, whoever rolls the lowest number gets attacked. Right? And then they know I'm not picking on anybody and that I'm just letting random chance determine it. So we don't know what the consequences would be that he's talking about, but it sounds like consequences not including death. And not going for the throat, I guess, means I won't attack your character if it's possible that the attack could kill him. So if the attack does, say D8 damage plus 2, which means it could do up to 10, as long as you have more than 10 hit points, I'll attack you, but if you have fewer than 10, I won't. I don't know what it means. It's not clear. But he said he won't go for the throat. But he did say then, this is one thing I do agree with, you're going to need to clear it with the other players. Now, this is very awkward because he said the other player was fine with it and did that, the player. But the player actually originally in the comment said he was very embarrassed about it and didn't want the other players to know. So it's strange that then later in the same, like the next paragraph in the same article, same post, he did actually go to the other players and admit that this was happening. I don't know exactly what happened. But apparently the GM said, I will go easy on you and your character won't die by die rolls. If the other players are okay with it, he went to the other players and they said they were okay with it. And so the GM said then, that's where we are. But he posted in Reddit to say, what do you guys think? So Professor Dungeon Master then said a couple of things. One, he said we have to consider social pressure in this situation, right? If I go to the group and say, would it be okay with you guys if your characters can be killed but not mine because I'm really afraid of character death and I get attached to my characters, right? They might all privately be thinking, well, who do you think you are to shield your character and not mine? But if the sort of group consensus is, oh, that's okay, it's fine, right? You're being pressured. If the guy says, I won't play unless we go with this rule, then now the players who say no are keeping you from playing, keeping somebody from playing in the group, maybe somebody they're friends with, etc. So what Professor Dungeon Master said, and I agree, is when something like this happens, there's a lot of social pressure to render the popular decision with the rest of the group rather than what you really think. So we don't actually know what these other players think or how they felt about it because they were all under pressure to say yes, right? They knew that clearly the DM has approved this, so the DM wants this guy in the group, or he would have just said no, right? I mean, this guy is making a fairly extraordinary request relative, not saying I want a non-lethal campaign for all of us, but saying it's perfectly okay if you kill the other characters but don't kill mine. That's a pretty extraordinary request. It's not very common that you get a GM agreeing to something like that. And if the GM agrees, then I mean, as an observer of this story, I would have to assume the GM is pretty enthusiastic about having the guy play because he's agreeing to a pretty extraordinary set of conditions. Knowing that as players, right? Maybe this is the GM's best friend or something. You can't say no to that. Or you're the bad guy, right? So there's this social pressure. I agree with Professor Dungeon Master about that. Professor Dungeon Master also said that, the whole point of rolling dice is because something unexpected could happen. He said, and like like I now do, he rolls in public. So his players know they're getting the exact results that the dice say. And as a consequence, they know he doesn't pull his punches, and my players know that too. And so um, he said, if you don't look at this, 3 misses in a row with an 80-something% chance. That's ridiculous. He said, there are other rule sets. Oh, come on. Why am I missing so much? All right, I'm going to lead this guy over here so he doesn't buff the other guys. So Professor Dungeon Master said there are other games, including his own rule set, where, when you go to 0 hit points, you might not die immediately. You might have, other things happen. But, classically in Dungeons & Dragons, you go to 0 hit points, you make your death saves. If you fail them, you die. Right now you get death saves. It is possible that you could survive. Right? It's not instant death the way it used to be in old school D&D. Can you believe how I am missing these guys? Come on. Meanwhile, I'm debuffing the crap out of them, and I have a really high defense, and he's not missing me at all. Anyway, classically in D&D, you go to 0 hit points, and your character dies. And so their death is on the table, and you shouldn't expect the character to be immune from that. That's what Professor Dungeon Master said, and he's got a whole great video on it. And I think it's awesome. He does a good job. Go ahead and watch it. I'm going to do something a little bit different in the sense that I'm going to talk about this from sort of couple of different angles. One of the things I would say is that one of the problems that this player is having is the game they're playing. Right? In the game of Dungeons and Dragons, typically death is on the table. It is a consequence of combat, and it is pretty much the only consequence of combat that they have in the game. I'm pretty sure I discussed this in one of my American Truck Simulator videos. There are no other consequences in D&D, in the rules, other than maybe getting a level of exhaustion or fatigue or something, which they do under certain extraordinary circumstances. There are no real consequences in Dungeons & Dragons for losing a battle other than dying. You don't lose XP. You don't get XP debt. You don't lose levels, right? They used to have consequences like that in D&D, and they've taken all of that out of the game, right? So you can't lose a level anymore. You can't permanently lose strength or dexterity or something. They used to be, was it Shadows? Used to permanently drain your strength or your con. And then a lot of undead used to permanently drain levels of experience, and you would just go down to the next level of experience. Oh, this is going to suck. Let's find Bentley. I don't want to deal with all these lieutenants buffing the whole room. So let's see if we can find Bentley and get him out of here. There aren't any. You don't have like the undead draining. Undead used to drain levels. Shadows, I think, used to drain strength. There were other things that could drain things or aid you, like the Staff of Withering. So there were other consequences that a DM could visit upon you if you were to lose a battle that did not include actual character death, right? But the developers of D&D took those away from the GM and removed them from the game because quote-unquote players hated them, sure. But that meant that the only consequence left of a character, right, instead of having a wraith attack your character, drain a couple levels, but you're still alive and you can gain the XP back again, the wraith can't do that to you, so the only consequence of losing to the wraith now is that you have to die. To me, that's a much worse consequence than losing a couple of character levels, right? I'd rather lose 2 levels and keep my character alive than have the character die and have to make up a new one, maybe, unless you like making up new characters, which I do, so maybe I wouldn't mind at all. But, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to die, but you don't want to lose levels, then, well, what's the consequence? There should be a consequence to losing, right? So I think that's because part of this is the design of D&D, right? That they don't have any other consequence in the game other than character death anymore. So death kind of has to be on the table, or losing means nothing. You just don't ever lose, kind of, right? Now, that's not true for all games, right? In other games, there are other consequences. In Call of Cthulhu, you might not die, but your character might go permanently insane. Now, that means he's unplayable. Is that the problem? I don't know. This is what I would have to ask the player. Is your problem the unplayability of the character? That once you make him up, you want to play him permanently? Or would you be okay with a character who was still alive but in an insane asylum and unplayable, essentially retired? Right? Is there a circumstance where you'd be okay with being unable to play the character as long as you know they live on in the fictional world of our universe? Right? Is it death he's worried about, or non-playability? We don't know the answer to that because this is D&D, and those two are synonymous, right? The only way you can make a character unplayable in D&D, absent some weird interactions with the DM or something, is if it dies, because they don't have insanity mechanics. They don't have anything that can force you to retire or to remove a character from play. Okay, so one of the questions I would have for this player is this a D&D problem? Is it just because the only consequence is death, or do you not want insanity either? Do you not want some other form of, shall we call it, forced retirement of your character so that you can't play it anymore, right? Is the problem death, or is it unplayable, being unplayable, right? They're two different things. In my Champions game, you could make a character unplayable by going over the limits we had for active point costs on powers, which was 70, right? We permitted you to go over it, but by our sort of common agreement, that guy's going to be trouble over there. By our common agreement, and that guy, see if I can hit this guy first. By our common agreement amongst my game group, the consequence of going over 70 active points was you could play one scenario with that character at the overpowered level, and after that they were permanently retired and gone. Okay, we never did it. The one time we did it was what we called the retirement scenario. We knew we were retiring our entire group, and I said, okay, everybody can go over 70 active point, can go to 80 active points for this scenario because we're retiring them, right? So that's an enforced retirement mechanic having to do with points that our group did. Would he have a problem with that too? You have to let me go over 70 active points because I always want to keep playing the character? I don't know. I'm assuming death is his problem, but probably he wouldn't like insanity either, right? So the first thing I would say to this person is, like, what's the actual problem here, and would you be, shall we say, okay with your character going insane or retiring in some other way? Out of the way. Jeez. So many of these things lock you with their animations for a very long time. I would say, if the problem is actual death, right, then to me, by the way, so I want to just pause here for a second. The reason I am not bothering to placate is because these AoE dots would reveal me anyway. So I'm not bothering. If you'd be okay with other consequences but not death, can we play a different game? A game in which death is not the primary consequence of defeat. Let me give you a great example. Champions. Characters hardly ever die by die rolls in Champions. It only ever happened once, and it was a villain killing another villain when I was running Champions. And nobody else, no other GM ever, by die rolls. It's really hard to kill a character. Death is generally not on the table. So what I would say is, assuming I'm okay as a GM with running Champions, I would argue that if we have players who don't want their character to die, then we should possibly choose a game system where death is not on the table. right? Because if death is on the table in the system, then I think it's on the table, right? I'm not going to take it off the table, especially if it's something like 5th edition D&D, where I'd say to him, look, Joe, or whatever his name is, the only consequence in the game to losing is death. If I take that off the table, there is no consequence. What am I supposed to do about that? Right? We either need to play a game where death is not on the table, or we need a game where there's another consequence besides death that I can give you, like Call of Cthulhu, where insanity is a viable consequence, right? Or you need to accept the consequence of death. What I don't think it's okay for you to do is say, I don't want the big consequence that everybody else has to face. Even if the other players say they're okay with it, even if they're actually okay with it, as a GM, I'm not okay with it. Because it takes a very important instrument out of my hands. I can never, nothing I ever do will ever make you scared for the life of your character. Will ever have that tension of my character, dude, my character might die in this scene. He knows his character can't. Now in Champions, not a problem. Why? Because characters don't die in Champions. What's the big consequence in Champions? Most of the time, you get captured, and as part of the capture, the villain could learn your secret identity, and then if you don't manage to defeat them and send them to jail right away, they could publicly release your secret identity, and now you have to buy off your disadvantage, and you don't get to you have to buy off your disadvantage, and you don't get to have a secret ID, right? So that's a consequence. You get caught by the villain and thrown into a death trap, which isn't really a death trap because they always have a way out, right? These are the comic book conventions. And comic book conventions are what we're following in Champions, so your character can't die. But usually what happens in Champions is that the consequence is the guy you're protecting dies, right? So you're protecting some sort of an innocent, and the innocent dies. If you look at the Avengers Age of Ultron movie, what's the threat? Ultron wasn't threatening the Avengers. He was threatening to drop a city from a great height and kill millions of people. And the Avengers could have easily just flown away and saved themselves. Ultron couldn't kill them. He wasn't trying to kill them. He was trying to kill innocent people to threaten the Avengers, right? And to do his evil stuff. And so typically in Champions, the threat is against innocents, and the villains are protecting the innocents. Or the heroes are protecting the innocents from the villains. So it's a different dynamic. And I'm perfectly fine with death not being on the table in Champions. In fact, that is the preferred way to play the game, including the rules saying so. So I would argue if we have one or more players who don't want death to be on the table, I feel like that's a perfectly viable thing to ask for. Let's play Champions. If people don't want to play Champions and they want to play D&D, then I'm going to say, well, death's on the table because that's what it says in the rules. Right? I think that you might have settings where death is less likely to be on the table. So, for example, in Savage Worlds, death is absolutely on the table in Deadlands, but it might not be on the table in East Texas University. It's absolutely on the table in Holler, that sort of thing. Oh, these guys are such a pain because they're all going to buff each other. Let's see if we can find Bentley, and maybe I can ignore these guys. I mean, I guess I can assassinate this one. He's pretty far from the others. Problem is, these guys are all purple. They have, it's hard to hit them to begin with when build-up's not on, and then they're going to buff each other. I don't know, did he buff anybody out here? And then they are making like they're going to floor me. Not fun. So we'll just see if we can find Bentley in here. So yeah, I mean, if you don't want your character to die, then let's play a game where characters generally don't die. Play in a setting where characters generally don't die, etc. Are you kidding me with the misses? 96.91. Ugh, so frustrating. Okay, but there's one more point that I want to make about all this, and that is, this guy said he's always wanted to play D&D, but he's been afraid his character will die, and he doesn't want his character to die. He wants his character to be immortal, unkillable. I submit to him and to everyone that this guy has never wanted to play D&D, because classically, in D&D, death is on the table. My friends and I, when we were little kids, knew that, and we were okay with it, and we actually thought it was kind of cool. And I had lots of characters die. That's part of D&D. And so what I submit to you, and I submit to this person, is he's never actually wanted to play D&D, because character death is part of D&D. That risk is there. It's part of Dungeons and Dragons. And if you take that off the table, you're not really playing D&D. Right? It's like saying, I've always wanted to play City of Heroes, but I don't want to play a superhero. Well, then you don't really want to play City of Heroes. What a mess this room is. Oh my gosh. Alright, we're going to work this little by little. And we're going to have to do some chipping away. We can't just go diving in. Now, we do have, we didn't have our level up bonuses. If I'd run in here really fast, we would have. We are higher level, but we're going to have to pull and stuff because I don't want to get in with the bosses. I've had enough deaths to the nemesis bosses by being careless, so we're going to be careful this time. So yeah, I would argue, no, he hasn't always wanted to play D&D. He's wanted to play something, I don't know what. He's wanted to maybe always try role-playing, but he hasn't always wanted to play Dungeons & Dragons because characters die in D&D, that's part of it, right? And so, if you're going to say, I've always wanted to play D&D but not with character death, then you haven't wanted to play D&D. That's like saying, I want to play D&D but I don't want there to be any dungeons or dragons. Or I want to play Call of Cthulhu but I don't want there to be any insanity. Or I want to play Champions but I don't want there to be superheroes. These are things that are part of the game, right? And so saying you want to play that game but you don't want this thing that's integral to the game means you don't actually want to play the game, right? It'd be like me saying I want a hamburger but I don't want to eat any meat. Then you don't want a hamburger because hamburgers have meat. Right? I'm not saying, oh no. Oh, wait a minute. I don't want to hit that guy over there. He's going to buff everybody. You can have a veggie burger, but that's not a hamburger. It's a veggie burger. Right? I want to play a Stalker, but I don't want to have to hide and do assassinations. Well, then you don't want to play a Stalker. I want to just run up to things and punch them. Well, then you want to be a brute or a scrapper, not a stalker. Stalkers hide. That's the purpose. Saying I've always wanted to play a stalker, but I've never played them because I don't like assassinating and hiding and creeping around missions is saying I don't really want to be a stalker. Okay? So this guy doesn't really want to play D&D. He wants to play something. He wants to roleplay, but he doesn't want to play D&D. And that's okay. Maybe he wants to play Champions. Maybe he wants to play something else. Right? But not D&D, because it's going to be tough. D&D, there's death on the table, right? That's my feeling. And so I would say to him, no, we're not playing D&D this way. We can try another game where there's a different consequence on the table, where death is not the only consequence or isn't even on the table. But we're not playing a game where the only consequence of losing is death and you're going to take that consequence away just for your character. That's not actually playing D&D. Oh, these surgeons are going to be such a hassle because they're going to heal everybody, aren't they? This is going to be a real pain. Alright. Overload. Buffs. Should put focus accuracy on first. Okay. So we got that. Now we're going to go after this guy first. I don't know who I should hit first, actually, because the Nemesis is going to shield the Archon, but the Nemesis is a pain in the neck, and I'd rather fight him solo. The Archon I can take care of, and he's just done. Okay, now Nemesis. Now I know we have Placate ready, but the problem is he has these AoEs that I think can pull me out of hide. So I don't know if I can assassinate him. Okay, I did. That's good. By the way, something that's changed about Nemesis. It used to be... Bye. So this is one of the issues I'm having. I'm used to the old way of fighting Nemesis. So what's different? Nemesis, when he did this thing, used to go intangible. And when you went to hit him, it would say unaffected, unaffected, unaffected. Well, part of what goes on there is that if you can't affect him, he can't affect you. So I'm used to kind of standing there against Nemesis and just unaffected, 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 okay, whatever, take some endurance, and eventually I can hit him again. But now that's not what's happening. They seem to have changed Nemesis so that he's going into a deflection mode, but he can still hit you. And he's so big that I didn't realize the words coming over here were deflected and not intangible, right? Or unaffected instead of deflected, right? I just wasn't watching that. I noticed on one of my rewatches, I'm like, wait a minute, he's never going unaffected. He's not going intangible. So I don't know when that change was made. It's post-Homecoming. I don't know when that change was made, but it's interesting that that change was made because... is there anybody around here? There's not. We'll just wait. It's interesting that that change was made. Maybe it was aggravating to players. I find the deflection thing more aggravating. But the reason I was standing in there toe-to-toe with Nemesis was when I wasn't doing anything, I thought he was just intangible. And then all of a sudden he's killing me, right? And I'm like, wow, he turned solid and just pounded me. And now I realize, no, he's not going intangible anymore. So that's an interesting change. And I'm going to have to account for that as I fight Nemesis in the future. This is a very long story arc. So this is Council versus Nemesis. Ah, board the train. So this is going to be an outdoor mission. We don't need that. Oh, we got to level up too. So yeah, I mean, look, my deaths against Nemesis were mostly carelessness, and I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say they weren't, but oh, they were ambushing me. Oh well, maybe they'll follow me. I don't think so though. I'm not gonna say they weren't, but that's a little bit of why I wasn't seeing why I was getting face planted. 99% of it was me being just bad play, but 1% of it was me not realizing that these guys weren't going intangible and that I was actually whiffing him rather than going through him. All right, laser beam eyes is our next buddy, and then physical perfection. I am highly tempted to get physical perfection now because I want to put slots in it, but we really need a ranged attack so that we can get rid of that and put this here. Maybe we're going to do that. Okay. So we got laser beam eyes, which means we need to go to the base and buff it, right? Put some slots in. I put some an enhancement in the slot. There's just going to be one slot, so just going to get an accuracy on it. Let's see how it does, actually. Oh, let's create something, because we've overloaded on salvage again, so... Extreme measures. This is a sniper attack. We don't need that. If efficacy adapter, we don't... Oh, that's the endurance modification thing? Or was it... It was power transfer I was looking for. That was the one I liked. This one... is lackluster. We don't need that one. This one and this one are the ones we want. Um, we don't have any accuracy up here. We don't really need this stuff. We'll create one to empty out the salvage a little bit. But what we really want is an accuracy. We got one of those, and we'll get rid of that. And now we will slap that onto laser beam eyes. So let's take a look at the detailed info on it. It does 55 damage per shot. That's not super great. It's okay. It doesn't use too much endurance. Decent recharge time. I don't know how much we're going to slot this. It's not a high priority. We just want to be able to shoot runners and do pulls and stuff and have a little bit more accuracy than the horrible accuracy of the Nemesis staff. And also this one, I don't think this one does KB, does it? No, it gives them minus defense, but it doesn't do knockback, which means we don't have to worry about them flying all over the place when we do a pull. So now missions, we're going to board a transit. Okay, so we can just go back to Talos Island. I've never gotten the laser beam eyes. You know, I'm probably going to have to change the color because they should be black. We'll see what color they are, but I'm probably going to want to change it. I'll do that off screen. So yeah, guys, tell me what you think about this whole thing. If you're GMing a game where death should be on the table and somebody says, I don't want my character to die, would you be okay with it? Would you say, then nobody's character dies? Would you say, no, that's not fair to other people? Would you ask the other players? Like, how would you handle it? I think for me, if I were playing Dungeons and Dragons, I would say, I'm sorry, but there is no other consequence I can give your character in combat, and as a result, I'm not going to be able to honor your request to not kill your character ever. If the dice so say, characters die. I won't purposely be brutal. I don't try to kill characters. As a GM, I mostly attempt to set up combats that are reasonable and that will be winnable by you, the players. But you have to understand, and this is sort of like Luke Hart points this out, in order for a battle to be interesting, challenging, exciting, and fun, it has to be possible for you to die. And that means that the characters might die. Not the whole party, hopefully. I hear a glowy. Where is it? Not the whole party, hopefully. Not all at once. Maybe not your character. But I won't play favorites. I'm not going to let you get away with something nobody else gets away with, because that's not fair. And I'm not going to say there's no death on the table, because that's part of the game. Now, if you and everybody in the group doesn't want to have death be on the table, then let's talk about what game we can play where death wouldn't be on the table. But if we're playing D&D, in order to make the battle interesting, the villains have to be able to do enough damage that a really lucky blow might be able to kill you after you've been worn down a little bit. And that's just the way the game is. Right? And I would probably say to the person, as I said to you guys, if you're going to tell me that you don't ever want your character to die, then you're telling me that you don't actually want to play D&D. Because the way D&D works is characters can die. And the last point I would say to this player is, if you've never played a role-playing game, I assume he doesn't mean just D&D. If you've never played a role-playing game, then you've never had a character die. You've never made up a character and played them for very long. So, A, how do you know you're going to get that attached to your character? If you've never played D&D, what's your point of reference? Are you talking about you used to write stories as a kid and you got attached to your characters in stories and you never had them, you didn't kill them off? I mean, that's not the same thing as a game. How does he know if he's never played D&D before or any other role-playing game? I'm making that assumption, right? Because for most people, D&D and role-playing games are synonymous, and I'm assuming that that's true for this guy, right? If he's that much of a noob, right, if he's played other games, he will have had occasion for his character to die. He didn't say that he did, so we're going to assume this is a neophyte. This is somebody who hasn't played role-playing games before. And so I'm just looking for the hostages here. See who's here. If there are bosses, I might go after them. I'm not going to worry about lieutenants and stuff. And so if you've never done this before, how do you know what you're going to like? You don't know because you haven't done it. So at least try it once and see what you think before a priori deciding you're not going to like it if characters can die. How do you know you might not find the battle more exciting if your character could die? You might think it's cool. You might think it's fun. You might think it's awesome. I do. So now I'm not saying that just because I do, everybody does. But I don't know if I would have thought, I'm sure, I am sure when I first started playing D&D, I did not want my character to ever die. And I would have thought it was horrible. Look at this miss streak on 66% to hit. I would have probably thought it was the most horrible thing in the world for my character to die. And then guess what? Some characters died, and I found out it's not the end of the world. Just make up a new character. By the way, one of the most fun things to do in a role-playing game is to make up a new character. And we had people in Champions who, although characters did not die by die rolls, who had asked to have their character narratively killed off because they wanted to make up a new character. Now, as a GM, I used to say, can we do something more mild than killing the character off? Because when you kill the character off, then you foreclose ever bringing it back. But role players tend to be dramatic, and it's a lot more dramatic for the character to die, right? And all of the comic books that everybody remembered back then, the death of Phoenix, the death of Bucky, the death of Batman, a death in the family, right? This is super popular in some of the comics to do it this way. So, hey, coolest idea I can think of to retire my character is to kill it narratively. So then the person would ask the GM, can you kill my character off? And the GM would say, please no. And yeah, I want to. And so you'd do it, right? So like we literally had people asking to kill their characters because they wanted to make up a new character. I would usually say, just make up a new character. Well, but why would my character leave the group? I don't know. Say he got admitted to a college in some distant town and he's going to leave for college. Like, who cares? You don't have to kill him. My point is, making up new characters is so much fun that sometimes my own players ask to have their character killed off so they can make up a new character. So before you decide, I wouldn't have any fun if my character dies, why don't you wait and see? Maybe you would. You don't know because you've never played the game and you've never had a character die. So why don't you try it first and see how it goes? That would be one of my things. You haven't played D&D by your own admission. You have no idea what it's like to have a character die. How could you possibly know before it's ever happened that you aren't going to like it? Okay, I can see that logically it doesn't sound like something fun, but how many times have you made up a D&D character? If you're so afraid, I could imagine you possibly never made up a D&D character, and you might not realize how much fun it is to make up cool new characters. So why not try it? Let's shoot him with the laser beam eyes and see what it looks like. That's pretty cool. Red's good, but I think we're going to make it dark blue or something. Or maybe medium blue to go with our character. Because we have like sort of black and bluish kind of theme. How do you know you're going to hate the character death when you've never made up a D&D character and you don't know how much fun it can be to make them up, and therefore how much fun it could be to make up a D&D character to replace a dead character? Because that's usually what happens, right? And I remember Matt Colville saying this, that one of his players once said, Matt, when you kill off one of my characters, I'm going to be mad. Just let me be mad, right? I'll be mad for half an hour, 45 minutes, 2 hours, and then I'll remember how much fun it is to make up D&D characters. I will come up with a cool new concept that I end up liking even better than my original concept, and I'll be happy. So just let me be mad. It's just part of the, one of the steps you have to go through when your character dies. You have to have a little bit of a grieving process, right? And then once that's over with, I'll be fine, right? And that was an experienced player who has had several character deaths and knows how much fun making up characters can be, and said, it's fine, as long as I get to make up a new character, who cares, right? I actually was almost in this same boat. So with my best friend's campaign, it wasn't clear at the time whether his campaign was going to replace mine, my Rome game. I hear a glowy. There. Okay, we're going to kill these guys. This one first. So we're at the end of his interim, in his sort of temporary campaign in between the beginning and the first and the second half of my Rome campaign, when I asked for a break one summer. So I'd been getting migraines and I was having some other health issues, and I said I could use a break. And so my best friend took over very kindly for 6 months and ran things. And at the end, we were having this battle, and it wasn't clear because the one guy, John, was with us in my best friend's game but didn't want to play in Rome, and my best friend was trying to get John to permanently play with us. And so it wasn't clear to me whether we were going to be switching away from Rome permanently. And I was playing this character, an elven character named Lyriel, who was a blade singer. And I just was not feeling the character. The mechanics for the wizard blade singer were okay, but the role play, like how I was playing her, I just couldn't get a feel for her. I couldn't figure out what she would say in a given circumstance. I couldn't. I remember my best friend saying, like, there was some sort of a nightmare. What's her nightmare? And I couldn't think of it. And since she loved books and stuff, I said, I don't know, somebody burning books. And he was like, come on. And so he said that her nightmare was she lost her ability to dance and sing, right? And I thought, well, that's the right one. But I just, again, I had no feel. He had a better feel for what the character should be than I did, which is sad, right? And I just, for whatever reason, I just wasn't feeling it. And in the very last session, I had said, because of my migraines and everything, I need to stop by 11:30 at the latest. And it was 11 o'clock, and I said, guys, I'm going to need to stop, and we're in the middle of a combat. It was 11:30, and then I think I teleported in. We were on this beach, and I teleported into the water, like a misty step or whatever, and I got KO'd, and wow, still on this story arc. So I got KO'd, and I think my character was into death saves, but whatever happened, I was like, guys, I have to go. You can play my character, but I have to go. My best friend was a little annoyed, but the other guys supported me, and they were like, no, if he's going to get migraines, you need to let him go so he can sleep. Because a couple of the other ones get migraines too. So I left, and the next morning they said, we won the battle and stuff, but the new girl, she was like, yeah, he had to kind of narrate the end of that battle anyway, because everybody, by midnight, everybody was saying they had to go, and we still weren't done with the battle. Like, it was too long. And so, but as I thought about what had happened, I realized that my character had been in the water deep enough she had to swim, gotten knocked unconscious, and was essentially drowning, right? So it occurred to me, she actually would have died there because she couldn't make, like, death saves. You fail death saves if you're drowning, I think. I can't remember. I looked it up and I was like, yeah, I think she would have died. And I thought, oh, good. I can make up a different character if we stay in this world, because I really don't want to play her anymore. I wasn't feeling the character, right? So I actually wasn't upset that she might have died. I actually kind of was hoping she did. So I actually brought it up to my best friend. I said, wasn't she in the water? Wouldn't she have died there? Like, wouldn't she have automatically failed her death saves there or something like that? And he was like, no. They pulled her out of the water in time, etc., etc. And then the new girl told me afterwards, well, he kind of narrated that because they didn't. Everybody was saying, "Look, we got to go." Like everyone was saying to him, "We've got to go." My best friend will stay up till 3 in the morning playing games, video games and stuff. So he would have been happy to stay up. He's a night owl, right? He would have just slept till 11 the next morning. But the new girl is on her church choir, and she might have had to go to an early morning service or something, so she had to get up, right? And even if she wasn't going to an early service and she was going to the 11 o'clock, she still has like a half-hour drive to the church, and because she lives in a rural area, and she'd have to get up and get dressed. And I'm just listening for a glowy. Get ready to go, and she's on the choir, so she's got to get there early and get into her seat and all the rest of it. Like, she can't just leave at 10 o'clock. She'd have to leave at 8:30 or something in the morning, and so she's got to get up, and she's got to get ready. And so, she needed to go. And then the one girl, like, she has, I don't know if was she in Finland yet? I don't think she was in Finland yet. But she has a little girl. And her little daughter's going to be waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and mommy needs to be awake, get her breakfast and stuff. Yeah, the father can help a little bit, but sometimes, the way little kids are, sometimes they're like, I want mommy, or I want daddy. And yeah, you could say to them, no, but it's a lot easier to just say, mommy, can you handle this, right? And if mommy's been awake until 2 o'clock in the morning playing a D&D game, that's not going to work, right? So all of them were saying we have to go, and I guess he just narrated the end of it. Right, so there wasn't really, I guess, I don't know if they ever actually had to make death saves for my character. But my point about this isn't that session, but the fact that because I just wasn't feeling this character, I would have been perfectly fine, in fact, preferred it. I was actually unhappy when I found out that no, your character didn't die there. Right? I think my best friend figured I was just being like narking on myself or whatever, but I was like, please let her be dead, because I want to make up a new character. I'm not happy with this one. I just wasn't feeling it. Right? So, and by the way, other than the new girl, possibly even the new girl as well, because I think one of the 3 characters she's made up for Deadlands, she wasn't. Oh no, it wasn't the Deadlands character. The character she had no feel for was in. I think it was that same campaign. Because she and I were kind of commiserating about it. She had made up this male ranger, and she really wasn't feeling that character either. She just didn't have a feel for how that character would act or behave. Now, I think part of her problem was it was the only new character she'd made, and her previous character, the only character she'd played before that, was basically herself as a D&D character, which is what most people do when they first make a role-playing game character. This one was an explicit attempt to be nothing like herself, and she maybe made it too different, and she was struggling with it, right? So I don't think she would have minded that character dying and having to make up a new character either, right? So my point here is that as an experienced gamer, I know that this can happen. And there are sometimes times where you prefer if your character would die so you can make up a new one. And there are other times when you don't mind that your character died because you can make up a new one. And even if you really, really like that character, it's always fun to make up new characters, and you'll come up with cool new ideas. One of the differences between being a GM and a player is as a player, you make up one idea and you kind of stick with it. And as a GM, you get to make up lots of different ideas, right? And so what's fun as a game master is the variety. As a player, you get a lot less variety, so one way you can kind of get more variety is if the character dies and you have to make up a new one, right? Or you do what my best friend does and play in 4 different online campaigns, which obviously you could do that too. But for most of us, we only have time to be in one campaign, so how do you get variety? If the campaign goes a really long time, there's only one way: change characters. Right now, you can change a character voluntarily by saying, I want to play a different character and have this character walk off into the sunset. But also, when the character dies, it gives you a great excuse to make up a new character. And they might have died going out in this like epic blaze of glory where they're like pulling a Boromir and saving the hobbits, right? And then Boromir's character makes up a new character called Faramir, right? His brother, and plays him. And he's a cool character too. And then he gets to play a character who's not tempted by the ring. Right? And so as experienced players, we know Death is not a big deal in a role-playing game. It's only his inexperience that's probably causing this. Now, there are some experienced players who will get really upset and freaked out if their character dies. That's true. But most of us, after the character dies and we get kind of used to the idea, we get super excited about making up another character. Right? So I think what this guy would probably benefit from would be playing some real old school D&D where character death is not only on the table but frequent. Play a game that has a funnel like Dungeon Crawl Classics or Shadow Dark where you're going to lose your initial characters and you play the first. In Shadow Dark you play them sequentially, and DCC you play them at the same time. They're level 0 and you go through a funnel, and then whoever lives through to the end, or whichever one you like best when you get to the end, is the one you play, right? That can be super fun, and you get used to some character death, and it's very low stakes because you're not attached to the character yet, right? The other thing I would say to a player like this is randomly generate your character. Do everything with random tables. There are tons of ways to do this. Tome of Adventure Design, I think, has some stuff in it for character creation. There's one, what is it called? I can't remember. There's one that's like, it just got a huge number of tables of just about everything for character creation. It's awesome, and you have your background and your personality and your quirks and your hindrances type thing. There are quirk tables for Savage Worlds. Randomly generate your character the first time, first 3 times, first 5 times. Randomly generate it. Just don't decide to make yourself. Don't decide to make your favorite character idea. Randomly generate it. And then you're not attached. So then if it dies, you just randomly generate another one and you're not attached to it. That would be my recommendation. Try it a little bit. See if you can understand why most gamers don't mind if their characters die. Professor Dungeon Master showed a great picture of Kelsey Dion, the creator of Shadow Dark. There was some convention, and the people who were playing Shadow Dark, I don't know if it was the people at the convention or just people in general. There was this huge bulletin board, and people came and posted on the bulletin board the character sheets of all their dead characters. And there's a picture of her with a big smile on her face pointing to the graveyard of player characters. These people posted it up. They thought it was fun to post it up. They don't mind that their characters died. It's okay, guys. It's okay, right? It's sort of like, and I'm going to end this here. As you guys know, I've been looking into doing war games and stuff, and so there's different levels: tactical, which is squad based, low level, you're like capturing huts in a village. Then there's operational, which is sort of regiment based. You're capturing towns in a small region. And then there's strategic, which is like divisions, and you're capturing counties in a large nation, right? And among the tactical ones, the one that was the innovator, as I've mentioned before, was Advanced Squad Leader. And Advanced Squad Leader is very expensive. It's super crunchy. It's probably the crunchiest of all of the games. My best estimate on a scale of 1 to 10 complexity is like a 9.5, right? It's very complex. It's very realistic compared to the other games and so on, but it's very complex and very expensive. And so I'm interested in it. I would like to get it eventually, but I've been looking at other systems, and one of them is called Old School Tactical. And there were these 2 guys. I think their channel is called The Player's Aid, and they were talking about Old School. I think it was Old School Tactical that they were talking about, and they were talking about it as a game. And one of them said that one of the things he likes about Old School Tactical is that the system itself is fun to do. And he said this is very hard because most of the time it's not like this. In most games, once you start losing and it's clear you're going to lose, it just becomes a lot less fun, right? And I see this like in Lock and Load on the digital version. I make a couple of mistakes because the scenario rules aren't clear to me. The game, like, they don't really explain things in the scenario, at least in the computer version. And so a lot of times I have to play through the scenario once and lose in order to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing in order to try to win. Sometimes I still can't win, but I almost always lose the first time I play a scenario because I'm just not sure what the new rules for this scenario are. And I just had this happen last night, and I've often said I wish they had a resign button on in the game because it's a 10-turn game, and by turn 6 I could see that I had messed up enough that there's no way I was going to capture all the victory points in 4 more turns. So I might as well just resign. But there's no resign button. So I just kept playing it out. I did in fact lose pretty badly. I got like 8 of 37 victory points and got my butt kicked. It wasn't really fun at the end. Why does this matter? Because what this guy said about old school tactical is it's such a fun game that you almost don't mind losing. Even when you're losing, you're still having fun, right? So his point was you can enjoy the game and not win. You don't have to win. It's okay to lose. You can still have fun, right? Same thing with characters dying in D&D. It's okay if your character dies. You can still have fun, right? I mean, after all, that's why in Call of Cthulhu, they tell you to make backup characters. In what is it, the Horror on the Orient Express? They recommend at least 1 and preferably 2 backup characters with your character, and the idea is have those 2 people be on the train with you. So if your character vanishes or goes missing, they have a reason to go looking for your character and get back involved in the story so that you can bring them in. So everybody has backup characters in Call of Cthulhu, so that if you do die, you don't have to wait till next session to make up a character. You just grab the backup character and bring him in, right? And you just immediately you're in there, and so that it stays fun, right? Because the whole thing is you want to play. As long as you're playing, kind of who cares what character you're playing, you can still have fun. Experienced gamers know this. This person is an inexperienced gamer who thinks the death of his character is going to be the end of the world. I would say as a GM, can you give it a chance and see if maybe it's not? But if you're that upset about it, let's play a game where character death isn't on the table. Saying I don't want to die, but I want to play D&D, that's not going to work for me as a GM. But that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and I hope this episode was a little more organized than the one I didn't post. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been Soloing the Stalker on City of Heroes.